Before Babylon built its towers, before Egypt raised its golden monuments, there was another civilization, one whispered about in the margins of myth, spoken of in dreams, and encoded in the memories of seekers across the globe. Its name was Lemuria. Lemuria, also called Mu in ancient legends, was no ordinary landmass lost to time. It was something more, a spiritual cradle of humanity, a culture rooted not in domination or technology, but in harmony, intuition, and sacred connection with the cosmos. According to esoteric traditions and indigenous memory alike, Lemuria wasn't merely a place, it was a frequency, a way of being, and for thousands of years, its story has been buried, denied, and ridiculed, not because it was false, but because it was dangerous to those who benefit from keeping humanity asleep. Because Lemuria carried knowledge, deep, soul-shaking knowledge, not of weapons or machines, but of who and what we truly are. It taught that we are not broken, separate creatures begging for salvation, but radiant beings connected to Source, to Earth, and to each other. A truth so liberating, so transformative, that those in power would do anything to keep it forgotten. But memory has a way of returning. In dreams, in symbols, in the soft, persistent pull towards something more. Maybe you felt it, a mysterious bond with the ocean, a longing for a home you've never seen, or visions of a land lost beneath the waves. This is not fantasy, it is remembrance, soul-deep remembrance. And in this journey, we're not just recalling a lost continent, we're reclaiming a forgotten blueprint for living a luminous path that could change everything we thought we knew about the past, and illuminate everything we're meant to become. There are stories so old, they live not in textbooks, but in the blood. Stories pass not through ink, but through vibration, whispers encoded in the silence between heartbeats. Lemuria is one of those stories, not just a name lost in the tides of time, but a presence buried deep within the human soul. And for centuries, those in power have worked tirelessly to make sure you never remember it. Because to remember Lemuria is to remember a different origin of humanity, one that doesn't begin with savagery and struggle, but with harmony, grace, and cosmic awareness. Lemuria was not a myth stitched together from sailors' tales or the idle dreams of mystics. It was a civilization, vast and vibrant, stretching across the Pacific Ocean long before history dared to begin its official timeline. Unlike the towering empires that followed, Lemuria thrived not on conquest, but on consciousness. Its people didn't worship gods made in the image of men. They communed directly with the source. There were no kings, no empires, no borders. Communities flourish like living mandalas, each soul a thread in a sacred tapestry of light. But such a way of life is dangerous to those who rule through fear. You see, Lemuria held no need for hierarchy, no need for intermediaries between self and spirit, and in that, it threatened every system built on obedience, shame, and separation. Imagine a society where telepathy was common language, where healing was not pharmaceutical, but vibrational, where intuition was trusted more than law. Now imagine what happens when the descendants of such a people awaken in a world governed by systems designed to keep them numb. This is why Lemuria had to be erased. Its memory wasn't just buried under oceans, but beneath layers of cultural amnesia, submerged in ridicule, mythologized into fantasy, and dismissed by the academic elite. Because Lemuria's truth doesn't just rewrite history, it rewrites reality. Across Polynesia, in the chants of Hawaiians, and in the Tamil legends of southern India, you'll find echoes of a sunken land called Mu. You'll hear of Kumari Kandam, an ancient realm beneath the Indian Ocean, brimming with wisdom and spiritual power. These aren't isolated tales. They're fragments of a shattered mirror. And when pieced together, they reflect a civilization that wasn't lost by accident, but buried with intent. Clairvoyants like Helena Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner didn't stumble upon Lemuria as fantasy. They encountered it in trance, in soul memory, in the luminous realms beyond the veil. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, spoke of a time when humanity walked in light bodies, when Earth was not yet hardened by density, and when connection to the divine was not a practice, but a state of being. This was Lemuria, and this is what we've been made to forget. The question is why? Because knowledge is power, and this was knowledge that could dissolve the very foundations of modern control. If humanity remembered it was divine, if we remembered that fear is a lie, if we remembered that the universe responds not to domination, but to resonance, then the empires built on scarcity and obedience would collapse in an instant. And so, the memory was cut away, woven into bedtime tales, hidden beneath the scientific dogma of progress, buried beneath oceans. Yes, but more importantly, buried beneath belief. But the truth never really dies. It waits. It waits in dreams of ancient temples and violet skies. It waits in the pull of the ocean, in the sacred patterns of geometry etched into your very bones. It waits in the rising tide of souls who look around this modern world and feel, in the pit of their being, that something essential is missing. Maybe you felt it, that nagging question. Why does the world feel wrong? Because it is. Because the world you were born into is a distortion of what once was. Lemuria wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it offered a model of human life based not on domination, but on symbiosis between soul and body, between earth and stars, between each of us and the infinite. To remember, it is not to escape the present, it is to reclaim the future. So let the memory rise, let the tides within you turn, because what was once forbidden is now awakening. To understand Lemuria, you must first forget everything you think you know about civilization. There were no walls, no rulers, no laws enforced by fear. Instead, Lemuria thrived in a rhythm of sacred reciprocity, each soul in resonance with the planet, the stars, and the great current of source energy that flowed through all life. Lemuria was not just a place, it was an embodiment, a lived vibration, a collective consciousness that breathed as one, spoke in frequencies, and dreamed in light. The Lemurians didn't just live on Earth, they lived with her. They were not masters of nature, they were her song. Every step upon the soil was sacred, every sunrise a ceremony. Their cities, if they could even be called that, were extensions of the landscape, shaped with harmony rather than conquest. Homes built from crystal and stone, attuned to energetic frequencies that supported healing, clarity, and joy. But beyond the physical, it was their consciousness that set them apart. Where modern humanity filters reality through language, reason, and linear time, the Lemurians operated in multidimensional awareness. They were deeply intuitive. Their communication was often telepathic. No need for words when thought and emotion could be shared in pure, unfiltered form. Conflict was rare, not because it was suppressed, but because empathy was the foundation of their relationships. To hurt another was to feel that pain yourself. In a world like that, violence becomes unthinkable. They were stewards of vibrational medicine, sound, light, touch, movement. These were the tools of their healing arts modalities, we're only beginning to rediscover today. They knew the body was not just flesh and blood, but frequency and form. Illness was not fought but harmonized, and emotional wounds were not pathologized but held in sacred space, given time to unfold and release. This was a civilization aligned with the feminine principle, not in gender, but in energy. Intuition over logic, flow over force, nurture over domination. They didn't seek to build towers to the sky. They listened to the stars and let their bodies become temples for celestial wisdom. There were no temples of gold, no rigid hierarchies of priests or gods to be appeased. Every Lemurian was seen as a unique emanation of source divine, sovereign, and sacred. Children were raised in collective harmony, not indoctrinated, but nurtured into remembering who they already were. Elders were not feared or dismissed. They were honored as carriers of deep time, and spiritual guidance came not from books or doctrines, but from direct communion with the unseen realms. Their calendar wasn't based on market cycles or political anniversaries. It followed the rhythms of the earth, the solstices, lunar tides, stellar alignments. Time was fluid. Days were sacred. Even sleep was seen not as a biological necessity, but as a portal to other dimensions, where guidance could be received, healing deepened, and spirit remembered its true nature. And then there was love, not as a romantic ideal, but as the elemental fabric of existence. Love was the governing law. Love as frequency. Love as action. Love as the underlying principle of every breath. This love was not possessive, not conditional. It was expansive, collective, infinite. It moved through their communities like light through crystal, reflected, refracted, amplified. You might wonder, how could such a civilization exist without falling into chaos? How could anything operate without rules, leaders, or enforcement? The answer is simple coherence. When individuals live in resonance with their soul's truth, when they are connected to their intuition, to each other, and to the planet, coherence emerges. It's not enforced, it's embodied. That's the secret the modern world has forgotten. Real order doesn't come from control. It comes from alignment, and it's that alignment that the Lemurians mastered. Yet despite all their grace, the Lemurians were not perfect. They faced challenges, shifts, karmic tides. As Earth evolved, so did they. Some began to densify, choosing to incarnate more fully into the physical realm. Others retreated into higher dimensions, becoming the spirit guides, ascended masters, and unseen allies that many sensitives still feel today. Some legends speak of Lemurians disappearing beneath sacred mountains like Mount Shasta, forming crystal cities in the inner earth. Others sailed to far lands, planting seeds of remembrance in Egypt, India, the Andes, and beyond. But even as the continent dissolved, whether by tectonic shift, solar event, or a turning of the great cosmic wheel, what did not vanish was the soul of Lemuria. It lived on, in the waters of the Pacific, in the chants of native elders, in the dreams of mystics and the codes of sacred geometry, in the hearts of those who feel too deeply, who cry at the stars, who see through the illusions of modern life and ache for something ancient and true. That ache is not nostalgia, it's memory. The soul of Lemuria is rising again, not in stone cities, but in human hearts, not as a return to the past, but as a rebirth of consciousness, a remembering of what was once known and what must be known again. If Lemuria was real, if it once flourished as a living, breathing society, then where is the proof? The answer isn't in polished museums or peer-reviewed journals. It's older, more elusive, and far more powerful. The evidence of Lemuria survives not in headlines, but in whispers, in dreams, in chants passed from grandmother to child, in symbols carved into stone long before history began, and in that ancient, bone-deep knowing that some truths live outside the reach of textbooks. Look to the Pacific. Across its scattered islands, stories echo with eerie consistency, legends of a great land swallowed by the sea. In Polynesia, the memory of Mu pulses in oral traditions, in sacred dances, in star maps carried not on paper, but in the minds of navigators who knew how to read the cosmos. In Hawaii, the chants still speak of a motherland, a place of origin where the people lived in divine harmony with earth and sky. Travel west, and you'll find Tamil, traditions in southern India that speak of Kumari Kandam, an ancient land now submerged beneath the Indian Ocean, once home to a civilization of profound spiritual knowledge. These are not fairy tales told for entertainment. They are ancestral truths, coded transmissions designed to outlive cataclysm, conquest, and colonial erasure, and still, the mainstream brushes them off. Myth, coincidence, primitive speculation. But what if they're not? What if the only reason we don't see the truth is because we've been trained not to look? Enter the mystics, the clairvoyants, the dreamers, the seers who peer through veils that science dares not touch. Helena Blavatsky spoke of Lemuria as a real epoch in Earth's spiritual evolution, a time when souls were less dense, more etheric, and deeply connected to the divine. Rudolf Steiner echoed these visions, painting Lemuria as a civilization where the spiritual and material were still united, where thought shaped matter and intention held creative power. Edgar Cayce, the famed sleeping prophet, described Lemurian beings as light-bodied and telepathic, capable of communing directly with higher intelligences. He spoke of Earth's early days, not as a savage crawl toward reason, but as a descent from higher awareness, a fall into matter from realms of radiant wisdom. Lemuria wasn't our primitive beginning. It was our sacred past. Skeptics will ask, but where is the archaeological evidence? And yet, is it absence or is it blindness? What of the megaliths scattered across the globe? Stone structures that defy modern engineering, with no known connection between the cultures that built them. What of the identical symbols, the spirals, the flowers of life, the sacred geometries etched into temples, continents apart? What of the pyramidic forms rising from beneath the sea near Yonaguni, Japan, or the submerged terraces off the coast of India? What if these are not anomalies, but remnants? What if what we call coincidence is actually survival, as Lemuria fell? However that fall occurred, its wisdom didn't vanish. It migrated. It was carried in boats, in crystals, in encoded symbols passed from one lineage to the next, from Lemuria to Atlantis, from Atlantis to Egypt, from Egypt to the mystery schools of Greece, India, and beyond. What we now call esoteric traditions are not inventions. They're fragments, echoes, and these echoes remain because they were never meant to disappear. Across the Andes, we see cosmologies that mirror the Lemurian worldview, unified fields, multi-dimensional beings, reverence for star nations like the Pleiades and Sirius. In Aboriginal Australian traditions, the Dreamtime speaks of a sacred past where the spiritual and material were one, and where ancestral beings created the world through sound and song. Sound familiar. In truth, these scattered traditions are not separate. They are puzzle pieces, each one holding a glimpse, a resonance, a sliver of a civilization that once lived in wholeness and whose memory still shimmers beneath the surface of our fractured world. And why does this matter? Because these are not just stories. They are roadmaps. They point not just to where we came from, but to who we truly are. The elite power structures of today depend on amnesia. They thrive when we forget the ancient truths that once guided humanity. They rely on us believing we are small, isolated, material beings crawling through a meaningless universe. But the echoes of Lemuria say otherwise. They remind us that once we lived in unity, that once we remembered the stars, and that we can, again. To dismiss Lemuria as myth is to miss the invitation, the call to remember, the call to awaken, because somewhere in your bones, in your breath, in the dreams you can't explain, you already know. What if the most extraordinary proof of Lemuria isn't buried under the sea, but encoded within you? Modern science speaks of DNA in binary terms, 2 strands, fixed code, biological inheritance, but the Lemurians knew better. To them, the body was not a machine to be measured, but a vessel of light, a living antenna, a bridge between dimensions. They spoke of 12 strands, 10 of which exist not in the physical, but in the energetic, quantum threads of consciousness that modern microscopes cannot see, but your soul can feel. These additional strands didn't govern muscle or metabolism. They governed memory, intuition, telepathy, time, perception, healing. These were not fantasy gifts, they were the natural faculties of a fully awakened human being. And in Lemuria, they were active, normal, essential. Lemurian DNA was crystalline in structure, not rigid crystal like quartz, but fluid crystal designed to conduct and amplify light. Information didn't travel through nerves and neurons alone, but through frequencies, harmonics, and resonance. The body was a symphony, and the soul the composer. Every cell was tuned to universal intelligence. That's why the Lemurians didn't age the way we do. They didn't fear disease. Their bodies were not battlegrounds, but temples, vibrational instruments attuned to the music of the cosmos. Illness, when it occurred, wasn't seen as a flaw, but a disharmony, an invitation to realign. But perhaps the most astonishing aspect of Lemurian biology was their multidimensionality. These were not flat, three-dimensional beings like modern humans believe themselves to be. They existed across planes, physical, etheric, astral, and beyond. They could perceive energy, communicate with star beings, and travel between realms of existence through conscious intent. They didn't need machines. Their consciousness was the technology. And here's the secret. The elites don't want you to know. Traces of this DNA still exist within us. It's dormant, yes, buried, but not gone. Do you ever sense energy in a room before anyone speaks? Do you ever know someone's thoughts or feelings without a word exchanged? Do you feel exhausted in crowds or electrified during full moons? These aren't quirks. They're echoes, activations, signs that the Lemurian code is stirring within you. The empath, the seer, the healer, the intuitive child who talks to animals or sees colors around people. These are modern manifestations of ancient remembrance, gifts long suppressed by a society that labels them delusion, distraction, or disorder. But in Lemuria, they were sacred skills, nurtured, refined, honored, and places like Mount Shasta in California hold the frequency of that sacred remembrance. For generations, mystics, travelers, and spiritual seekers have reported profound experiences on that mountain, visions, downloads, encounters with beings of light. Legends speak of Telos, a Lemurian city that still exists beneath the mountain in a higher dimension, pulsing with crystalline architecture and loving intelligence. To those attuned, the mountain doesn't just hold mystery, it feels like home. Because home isn't always where you were raised. Sometimes it's where your soul remembers. Other gateways exist in the Himalayas, the Andes, The Pacific Islands. These are not random locations. They are energetic nodes, ancient portals where Lemurian frequency still flows, waiting to be reawakened by those ready to receive it. Crystals, too, are part of this living memory. Lemurians worked with large quartz formations, not just for beauty, but for communication. Crystals were libraries, vibrational databanks where knowledge was stored, encoded through intention and light. To meditate with the Lemurian crystal is to open a door in your own consciousness. Many report visions, healing, or the sudden remembrance of lifetimes they've never studied. That's not imagination. That's the soul reclaiming what was hidden. And make no mistake, this awakening is accelerating. More people are feeling it. More children are arriving on Earth, already attuned to these higher frequencies. They reject systems that feel wrong. They crave authenticity, energy, truth. The old world tells them they're too sensitive, too distracted, too different. But in Lemuria, they would have been called initiates. This isn't about nostalgia for a golden age. It's about evolution, a return not to the past, but to the fullness of being human, whole, connected, divine. The Lemurian code doesn't demand you believe in myths. It invites you to remember your nature and to trust that your yearning for peace, for unity, for something more is not a flaw, but a map. You are not broken. You are encrypted, and the code is waking up. If Lemuria was real, if its teachings held such transformative power, why has its story been smothered beneath ridicule, omission, and silence? Because Lemuria was never forgotten by accident, it was erased deliberately, strategically, and with precision. Power fears nothing more than a population that remembers its inner sovereignty. And Lemuria's core truth was simple, dangerous, and liberating. You are divine, not metaphorically, literally. You are a spark of source, a being of light in physical form. And that knowledge, if awakened in the masses, would shatter the very foundations of modern civilization. Because modern civilization isn't built on unity. It's built on hierarchy, on systems that separate the few who rule from the many who obey. Governments, religious authorities, corporate structures, they all depend on one premise: that you must be governed, guided, or saved by something outside yourself. But Lemuria taught the opposite, that truth, healing, and power all arise from within. That intuition is more trustworthy than dogma. That love not fear is the organizing principle of reality. This isn't poetic, it's revolutionary. And revolutions that start from within are the hardest to control. So the erasure began, as Earth's energies shifted through tectonic upheavals, cosmic cycles, or karmic resets. Lemuria physically disappeared, but the real suppression came after. Survivors, it's said, scattered across the globe, bringing fragments of their knowledge to India, Egypt, the Andes, Polynesia. They didn't carry flags or armies, they carried frequency. They etched their wisdom into stone, into sacred rites, into encoded language meant to outlive empires. And for a time, it did, until new systems arose, systems rooted in conquest, colonization, and control. Empire after empire swept across the land, burning temples, outlawing sacred practices, and branding spiritual traditions as heresy. Secret societies rebranded ancient knowledge, hoarding it for the elite. Religions restructured spiritual truth into hierarchical control. And over centuries, the name Lemuria faded from memory, left behind only in veiled allegory and mystic visions. But the suppression didn't stop there. It evolved with the times. As science took the throne, once held by kings and popes, the narrative was rewritten again. Anything that could not be measured, dissected, or monetized was dismissed as fantasy. Lemuria was downgraded from ancestral memory to myth. Schools taught us a linear, materialist history. Spiritual wisdom became superstition. Consciousness was reduced to chemical reactions in the brain. And the human being, once a multi-dimensional miracle, was reduced to biology, debt, and data. We were taught to trust only the external governments, experts, institutions, never the inner voice, never the gut knowing, never the energetic pull towards something more. And this, more than anything, is why Lemuria remains hidden. Because to remember, Lemuria is to break the spell, to see through the illusion that authority lies outside of you, to remember that you are not a powerless consumer in a dying world. You are a sovereign soul in a living universe. Imagine what would happen if millions of people woke up to that truth. Wars would become obsolete. Fear would dissolve. Institutions built on division would collapse, not in flames, but in irrelevance. People would stop asking for permission to be free. And that, for the elite, is the ultimate threat. Because control doesn't require chains anymore. It only requires amnesia. The erasure of Lemuria was never about hiding a landmass. It was about hiding a template, a way of life that makes oppression impossible. A blueprint for conscious, compassionate civilization. The Lemurian model didn't need police, laws, or money. It operated on resonance, intuition, and love. That sounds impossible to modern ears, but only because we've forgotten what's possible. But here's the twist the elite didn't see coming. You can't erase soul memory. You can bury it, distract it, drown it in noise, but you can't delete it, because the code lives inside you. And as Earth shifts again through solar activity, energetic upgrades, and collective awakening, the frequency of Lemuria is rising. It's activating through synchronicities, visions, and sudden callings to spiritual practice. It's whispering through art, music, and movement. It's being reawakened in the dreams of children and the meditations of healers. The very tools once used to keep us asleep, mass media, global connectivity, AI, are now transmitting signals of remembrance. And once a soul remembers, it cannot be unawakened. This is the great shift underway. Not a battle of politics or economics, but a restoration of memory. So ask yourself, why were you born now? Why does this message reach you in this moment, on this day? Maybe, just maybe, because you are part of the reawakening. Not to rebel, not to destroy, but to remember, and in that remembrance, to reclaim a power that was never truly lost, only hidden. If Lemuria's knowledge was buried, how does it still speak to us? Through symbols, through frequencies, through codes etched not just in stone, but in the architecture of the cosmos, and in the subtle language of energy that speaks directly to the soul. These are not forgotten artifacts. They are living transmissions, and the Lemurians knew exactly how to leave them behind. Sacred geometry was one of their most profound tools, a universal language that transcends culture, time, and spoken word. Patterns like the spiral, the flower of life, and the lotus were not decorations. They were keys, each one a visual frequency, designed to resonate with the dormant codes within the human psyche. Take the spiral. Found in ancient petroglyphs across the globe, from Ireland to the Pacific Islands, it is the signature of Lemurian wisdom. More than art, it represents the soul's journey ever unfolding, expanding inward and outward in a sacred dance of evolution. The spiral reflects the shape of galaxies, the growth of seashells, the winding of DNA. It reminds us that everything is connected, everything is alive, and everything is in motion. Then there is the flower of life, This intricate lattice of interlocking circles appears in temples from Egypt to China. It is said to be the blueprint of creation itself, the energetic matrix upon which all life is built. To meditate upon it is to align your consciousness with universal law. It reawakens memory, not of events, but of truth, of oneness. Even more revered was the Tree of Life, a symbol adopted later by mystical traditions such as Kabbalah and Hermeticism. But its roots go deeper. To Lemuria, the Tree of Life was not just a metaphor. It was a map, a diagram of the energetic flow between realms, earth and heaven, body and spirit, self and source. Each branch a path, each node a key. It guided the initiate toward awakening, showing how divine energy moved through the body, the planet, and the stars. But these symbols weren't static. They were interactive. They responded to intention, to vibration, to state of mind. The Lemurians used them in ceremony, in healing, in teaching, and they encoded them into crystals. Lemurian crystals, particularly those found near Mount Shasta and in the Himalayas, are unique. Long, striated bodies with natural barcodes along their sides. These grooves are not random. According to mystics and healers, they are records, stored wisdom, messages that awaken only when touched by the right frequency. To meditate with one is to receive a transmission, a vision, a stirring in the soul that defies language. Those who work with these crystals often describe sudden clarity, waves of emotion, or vivid memories of lifetimes they've never studied, memories not of places, but of being, of knowing, of living in harmony with forces that this world has long ignored. This is how Lemuria survives, not through politics or textbooks, but through resonance. These sacred shapes and objects are not relics, they're portals. They awaken what has been dormant. They activate the inner Lemurian, the part of you that remembers how to feel energy, how to heal with sound, how to speak with light. You don't need to believe in this. You only need to feel it, because these symbols weren't created to convince the mind. They were created to bypass it, to speak directly to the geometry of your soul. That's why they appear again and again on ancient altars, in crop circles, even in modern architecture, as if something or someone is trying to remind us, visually, viscerally, of what we've forgotten. And many are remembering, artists who channel sacred patterns without knowing why, musicians who tune to 432 hertz and feel the shift in their own bodies, children who draw spirals obsessively or build mandalas from stones and sand without ever being taught. These are not trends. These are activations, echoes returning to coherence. Because symbols are not static, they evolve with us. When you trace a spiral with your finger, when you meditate with a Lemurian crystal, when you stand inside a stone circle and feel the tingling in your skin, you are not engaging with history. You are participating in a living transmission, one designed not to teach you something new, but to help you remember what you already know. The world may scoff at these things, call them coincidence, pattern recognition, delusion. But the soul doesn't scoff. The soul recognizes truth instantly. That flutter in your chest, that sudden sense of peace, that chill down your spine, that's Lemuria speaking. And it's speaking through every sacred symbol, every piece of ancient geometry, every vibration that resonates with love, balance, and cosmic harmony. This is how the Lemurians left their message, not with words, but with light, sound, shape, and frequency. And now, after millennia of sleep, their language is being heard again, not just by the few, but by you. There's a reason you're still here, reading, listening, Remembering. It's not curiosity. It's not coincidence. It's resonance. Some part of you already knows. It's why the ocean calls to you in ways you can't explain. Why ancient temples make your skin prickle. Why you've always felt like a stranger in a world that worships noise and speed, while your heart longs for stillness, depth, and connection. These aren't random quirks. They are signs, clues that you carry within you, the imprint of Lemuria. You may not remember it in words. You may not see visions of crystal cities or starlit temples, but if your soul stirs at the idea of a world built on love, intuition, and unity, then you are remembering. And if you feel called to heal, to hold space, to bring peace into chaos, you're not just empathic, you're awakening. Lemurian souls incarnate with the mission, whether they remember it or not. They come not to escape the world, but to help transform it, to plant seeds of harmony in places ruled by fear, to hold light where darkness has grown loud. And often, they suffer for it, because the world you were born into does not yet recognize what you are. You may have felt too sensitive for this world, crying at beauty, trembling at violence. You may have felt overwhelmed by crowds, by cities, by the dense energies that press in around you. You may have been told you're too much or too soft, but in Lemuria, your sensitivity would have been your strength. Your empathy would have been celebrated, your gifts cultivated. You would have been seen for who you are, a keeper of wisdom, a guardian of light. Many Lemurian souls carry what's known as starseed lineage, connections to cosmic families beyond Earth. The Pleiades, Sirius, Andromeda. These aren't fantasies, they're vibrational truths. In Lemurian times, communication with star nations was natural, normal, essential. The Lemurians didn't worship the stars, they worked with them. They understood the stars were conscious beings, part of the same great web of life. They traveled in dream, in spirit, in frequency. And they remembered that Earth was not isolated, but one node in a vast galactic network of awakening. That memory lives in you. Maybe you've looked up at the night sky and felt tears rise with no reason. Maybe you've had dreams of floating, of flying, of being submerged in violet light. Maybe you've always felt you were from somewhere else. That longing is real. It's the echo of a time when your soul moved freely between stars, between lifetimes, between dimensions. But you came back here, now, for a reason. This is the hour of great remembering, and many Lemurian souls have chosen to reincarnate now, not to relive the past, but to midwife the future, to reawaken the ancient wisdom encoded in your DNA and bring it into this modern world, not as dogma, not as religion, but as vibration, action, embodiment. You're not here to preach, you're here to be, to live with open heart and clear intention, to hold space in your family, your community, your work, to create beauty, to restore balance, to remind the world by your very presence that there is another way to live. And the signs of your Lemurian nature are everywhere. Do you feel a deep connection to the ocean, not just its beauty, but its silence? It's knowing Lemuria was a water civilization. Its frequency lingers in salt waves and coral reefs, in sea foam and tide. Do you work with crystals, not as objects, but as allies? Do you feel their pulse, hear their call? Lemurian souls often recognize these stones, instinctively choosing them, arranging them, meditating with them long before they've been taught how. Do you feel called to sacred geometry, to energy healing, to sound therapy? Lemurian wisdom flows through these modalities. They are not trends. They are tools of remembrance. You may also feel an inexplicable homesickness, not for a place on a map, but for a way of being, a life you've never lived, but ache to return to. That ache is real, and it's not pulling you backward, it's pulling you forward. Because the Return of Lemuria is not about rebuilding a lost continent, it's about reactivating the lost self. It's about bringing that vibration of unity, compassion, sacred presence into this fractured world. It's about showing what's possible when we remember who we are. You are not here by chance. You are not broken. You are not alone. You are part of the rising tide souls encoded with ancient frequencies, awakening to a call that was never lost, only silenced. So the question is no longer, do you remember Lemuria? The question is, what will you do with what you remember? Something is stirring on this planet, something vast, invisible, and unstoppable. It hums beneath the chaos of collapsing systems. It whispers through moments of synchronicity, through the voices of children speaking truths they were never taught. It pulses in meditations, in sacred circles, in the quiet tears that fall when you finally feel connected again. This is not a trend, not a phase. It is the return of Lemurian consciousness, not as myth, not as memory, but as movement, a reemergence of the frequency that once guided a civilization of peace, unity, and divine embodiment, and now rises again, not from the ocean floor, but from within us. You may have felt it already, the shift, the cracking open, the shedding of identities that no longer fit, the sense that you're not just witnessing history, you're part of a prophecy unfolding. This shift has been foretold for millennia, by ancient cultures, by mystics, by sacred texts hidden and protected through dark centuries. The rise of the divine feminine, the return of the star nations, the great turning of the yugas, the transition from 3D into higher dimensional consciousness, often called 5D or the ascension timeline. And central to this shift is remembrance, the awakening of the Lemurian blueprint, not in temples, but in hearts, not through conquest, but through coherence, a remembrance that teaches we are not separate, we are not powerless, we are creators, each of us, sovereign and luminous, capable of healing, transforming, and rebuilding a world that reflects the divine. This awakening isn't always graceful. As higher frequencies flood the earth through solar flares, planetary alignments, and rising Schumann resonance, anything built on illusion begins to crack. Old systems are collapsing. Institutions that once felt immovable now tremble. Fear surges through the collective, but underneath that fear is an invitation to surrender, to remember, to realign. You may have noticed your own shifts intensifying. Sudden releases of emotion, surges of energy, a deepened sensitivity to people, places, and truth, physical symptoms that defy medical logic but respond to grounding, breath, and light. These are not malfunctions, they're recalibrations. Your body is adapting to hold more light. Your soul is clearing the debris of lifetimes. Your mind is learning to trust the silence between thoughts. Because the Lemurian path isn't about knowing, it's about being. It doesn't demand mastery of doctrine. It asks for devotion to presence. It calls you not to escape the world, but to embody your soul fully within it, to walk slowly, to speak with love, to remember the earth as teacher, temple, and kin. This is why Lemurian souls have returned, to anchor this new vibration, to be living bridges between what was and what will be. Many are creating communities rooted in resonance, not hierarchy, reclaiming the sacredness of ritual, music, food, and land. Others are holding space in subtle ways by parenting with consciousness, by creating art that awakens, by simply showing up with compassion in places where it's been forgotten. This is how Lemuria rises not in spectacle, but in subtlety. Not through force, but through frequency. And it's happening all over the world. In forests and deserts, in cities and oceans, in temples and tenements, souls are waking up, remembering their power, calling others home, not to a lost continent, but to the truth of who they are. Because Lemuria was never just a place, it was a vibration, and that vibration lives in you. Every time you choose love over fear, you activate it. Every time you trust your intuition, you amplify it. Every time you see the divine in a stranger's eyes, you resurrect a piece of that ancient, sacred civilization. You are not the echo. You are the voice. You are not the seeker. You are the remembering. And as this Lemurian frequency grows stronger in the collective field, the illusion of control begins to crumble. The elite may have tried to suppress it, to bury it beneath dogma, distraction, and despair. But truth cannot be destroyed, only delayed. And that delay is over. This is the dawn. This is the rising. This is the great return. So as we close this journey, not in ending, but in emergence, ask yourself, what if Lemuria was never lost? What if it has been waiting all this time for you